And this talk is going to focus on WordPress because that is the open source project I am most familiar with. And we're also going to talk about the why of volunteering or contributing to WordPress, whether as individuals or as a company. And I really welcome your participation today. I'll have some questions for you throughout the presentation, and I'll try to leave some time for Q&A. So please do use the chat feature to the extent you feel comfortable with, and ask me any questions that you may have. So I want to start off by asking you to share a volunteer experience. It doesn't need to be in WordPress, but I want to know what you did. And so while you're writing, I'll share too. I currently live in Madrid, but I used to live in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. And when I lived there, I was really involved with an environmental nonprofit called the Mountains to Sound Greenway. And I volunteered for everything from trail maintenance to planting trees to removing invasive species like Himalayan blackberry, which, by the way, if you've never done that before, it's really good exercise. So let's see. All right, Sandy used to organize events for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Nice. I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to share. Just a couple more seconds. Vancouver. And yeah, Philip from Vancouver, Canada uses WordPress to write about climate change projects in Africa. Very cool. Well, I love these. Thank you so much for sharing with me. And what's interesting, I think, is when we talk about volunteer work, contributing to open source isn't one that jumps to the forefront of people's minds. We think about planting trees, organizing events for the Leukemia Society, or talking about climate change. But for WordPress and other communities that rely on contributors, open source is the keystone that makes the whole project possible. And that's because as an open source project, and thanks to its license, WordPress software comes with 4 freedoms. So first, the freedom to run the software for any reason you want. Second, the freedom to study the source code in full. Third, the freedom to copy and share with others. And fourth, the freedom to modify the software to suit your needs. So this gives a lot of power to the builders and users of WordPress and also enables contribution. And the nature of open source has helped WordPress be very successful. So last I checked, according to W3 Techs, 42.4% of the internet uses WordPress. In a really fascinating study done by WP Engine on the WordPress economy, they estimated that the global economy for WordPress was around 597 billion in 2020. So WordPress is powerful and flexible and readily lets you and me build freely on core software. It empowers us to own our own content online. It enables us to build whole businesses on WordPress software, from hosting companies to theme or plugin providers, thousands of agencies. So I'm curious, do you use WordPress? And if so, how do you use it? I'm going to take a quick peek at the chats here. I use WordPress daily. I have a blog where I mostly talk about community building. Once upon a time, I blogged a little bit about my travels, but I also use WordPress daily for work as a discussion tool for project planning and for a heck of a lot of collaboration. And Sandy built sites for others. Philip shared earlier that I use WordPress to write about climate change. Excellent. Supporting others using WordPress for e-commerce, teaching people how to build sites for others too. So yeah, there's a lot of ways people use WordPress. And in addition to astronomical growth, what sets WordPress apart is that there is a huge global contributor community. I took this photo from WordCamp Phoenix in 2019. The attendees are enjoying lunch, but you can see it's a big group. Unlike closed source projects, open source enables anyone to continually build and iterate. So while you can't contribute to the next iOS release unless you are hired by Apple to do so, You could join the thousands of WordPress contributors in contributing code, design, improving accessibility, building community, marketing, creating documentation, offering support to other WordPress users. And everyone is a volunteer contributor in the WordPress open source project, which might be really surprising. There's got to be a really compelling reason to contribute to open source. But before we get there, I want to know, have you contributed to WordPress? And if so, what did you do? I spend the vast majority of my time with the community team, where I support event organizers, deputies, and mentors. Right now, I'm mentoring WordCamp US, which is really exciting, and I also hope to see all of you there as well. And one big driver for me in doing what I do is around lowering barriers for contribution so that everyone can participate. I'm looking at the chat right now. Taco, yes, has contributed a bit, more than a bit, to various teams. Courtney contributes to the training team, where they help create resources for meetup organizers and individuals wanting to learn WordPress. Excellent. Great, thank you so much for sharing. So we've mentioned that companies are built on WordPress software, so they are heavily involved in the WordPress space already. Businesses build plugins, themes, they offer services for WordPress, and WordPress relies on businesses to extend what it does. And like many businesses outside of open source, WordPress organizations can participate as event sponsors, offering financial support to help keep things going. So GoDaddy Pro, for example, supports WordPress communities worldwide by being one of our incredible global community sponsors. But then, in 2014, here comes Matt Mullenweg, co-founder of WordPress, calling on organizations to dedicate 5% of their people to WordPress development. And Matt believed that if WordPress-based organizations maintain this ratio, it would be the minimum for a sustainable WordPress ecosystem. And this is what led to the creation of 5 for the Future, where 5% of dedicated resources powers the next generation of the web. In his original post, Matt described how 5% didn't sound like much, but that it would add up really quickly. And my personal opinion is that I love that he phrased it as 5% of their people. It wasn't money that Matt was calling for, but people like you and me, because when it comes to furthering WordPress and open source and building incredible software for everyone, we need us. We need our brains, all of our skills and smarts and perspectives and sheer amazingness. So to give you a quick sense of its impact today, we estimate that there are currently 133 pledged companies for a total of 358 sponsored contributors for over 4,600 sponsored hours per week, which is pretty cool. And I'm curious, is anyone else working at a company that participates in 5 for the Future? I work at Automatic, and I am one of the people in a whole division that is sponsored to contribute to the WordPress project full-time. Yes, Taco does at Yoast. And I know GoDaddy also does the same. Excellent. All right, but that brings us to a pretty big question, because running a business or agency on WordPress is undeniably a very big job already. And if you are involved in the WordPress space already, why would you want to get even more involved and dedicate your staff's time and energy towards WordPress development? And when Matt proposed this, he recognized it as a big commitment, but he also emphasized that it's important for the long. It's an important long-term investment in the health of WordPress, and suggested that it could look incredibly modest in hindsight. This question of why do organizations participate in 5 for the Future is a really excellent one to ask, because we are all very busy people. So when we spend time and energy somewhere, there's going to be a reason for it. And that extends to volunteer work and contribution to WordPress. So I don't know that this is what Matt had in mind when he said he thought this would look modest in hindsight, but I'm here to tell you that dedicating 5% of your staff to contribute on WordPress has some really wonderful benefits for your organization. So let's go back and revisit all of those great volunteer experiences that you shared earlier. And I want to know, when you volunteered, what did you get out of it? I loved volunteering with the Greenway because first, yes, it was excellent exercise, but I also took pride in helping to preserve our local public spaces and natural areas. And I love hiking, so it was really cool to build a trail that I knew I would one day use. And I also made a lot of friends in that community, so it was really fun for me. And back then, I also worked for a commercial real estate consulting firm, of all things. And my team there would also regularly volunteer with the Greenway. And it was an excellent team bonding experience. It was something different than what we usually did. And it was also something we did that we could show that we did for our local community. I'm seeing other benefits like the warm and fuzzies, and yeah, having friends around the world. And yes, we get to put our business's name as an in-kind sponsor on the event, and connecting youth especially. Nice. Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of personal rewards that we feel when we volunteer. And I believe that this same underlying sentiment applies to contributing to the WordPress community. If you are contributing, you should be getting something out of it, similar to volunteering anywhere else. And there are benefits that are deeply satisfying that come with volunteer work, things like a sense of pride or accomplishment with a project. And I want you to have that. On the WordPress community team, this is what we call the gets of contributing to open source. And they are so tangible for both individuals and the companies they work for. So here are the gets of contributing to open source. The first is impact. When you work on WordPress, you work on software that powers 42.4% of the internet. And that's huge. So if you are contributing to WordPress core, you help make decisions that impact millions of users and their sites. When you help write documentation on how to use WordPress or help with support, that's also viewed by millions every single month. On the community team, individual organizers bring together WordPress communities locally on a regular basis. And we have almost 500,000 members across 754 meetups in 110 countries. The next get is growth. When I work with volunteers, one of the first things that I want to know is, what are they interested in over what their experience has been? Contributing to WordPress is a really great way to learn and grow new skills while doing the thing. And there are a multitude of ways to contribute without knowing any code. I am an excellent example of that. I do not know how to code. For example, a WordPress meetup organizer isn't required to have any prior organizing experience. When community deputies vet organizers, what we look for is their enthusiasm for WordPress. And as they organize events, they start gaining that experience. And so we have organizers who start out with no organizing experience at all. And in a few years, they're organizing some of the biggest WordPress events. And the same is the case for different teams, even on core, where they have a tag called Good First Bugs. And that is excellent for people who are learning to code or just looking to get a better sense of how WordPress is built. Contributors in WordPress also pick up other skills like leadership and communication, project management, and more. And these are real skills that people add to their resume and bring back to their workplace. Taco, I love that you shared that improving your skills through feedback from people from very different backgrounds. Yeah, like that's a get that you get along the way. One other big get is training and support. So while volunteer roles are usually based on interest, sometimes contributors like to share their experience. I personally did a ton of volunteering and community building work before I got involved with WordPress. And once I got here, that's what I wanted to keep doing. So on every WordPress team, you're going to meet other contributors who are eager to help and collaborate, give feedback and training, which makes for a really supportive environment. On the community team, we have exceptional deputies and mentors, people who have lots of experience with organizing events and building communities who help new organizers along the way. The same thing is true with the Polyglots team. There are global mentors who support locales and new translators. On the training team, you have really experienced educators who are ready to help you create a lesson plan or design a workshop. You can be sure to have a lot of support and learning opportunities as you contribute. Hot tip here is ask for feedback. I've never met a single person in WordPress who isn't willing to give feedback when asked for it. And another get is safety. So WordPress continually iterates. So this is a really excellent place for testing out new ideas, which can also be really intimidating if we think about the scale and impact of WordPress, right? Because arguably, bad code could really mess up that 42.4% of the internet, which I know is a really big, extreme example. So let me give you another example of where something could go wrong, but there are safety checks in place. So living in Madrid, I am learning Spanish, and it's really cool that I can get some practical experience by translating WordPress into Spanish. But I am still learning. And one area that I'm not particularly good at yet is knowing where accents go. And let me tell you, those accents change words entirely. So what helps me contribute and learn is knowing that all translations are reviewed by someone who has a deeper knowledge of the language before it goes live. The point is, when you are contributing to a project with such big impact, it's really reassuring to know that there are these checks and balances in place. Another very real example right now on the community team, we've been talking a lot about how to help organizers move back to in-person WordCamps. And that is something with no real precedent that the whole world is trying to navigate right now. And so we rely on contributors around the world to share their perspectives and help us do that work as safely and as thoughtfully as possible. And here's your warm and fuzzies. One last major get is community. When you contribute, and when you contribute regularly, you're going to work with the best group of volunteers and meet people around the world. So on top of new networks and opportunities, there are really deep WordPress friendships. It's really challenging and hard work that we do together, but people really enjoy spending time with each other and make lifelong friends. Earlier, before we started, Sandy said it feels like a family. So when organizations sponsor their employees as part of Five for the Future, their employees are receiving all of these benefits through contribution. And if you are a business built on WordPress, there's some pretty clear benefits from having your employees gaining relevant skills and getting to know each other in the ecosystem. And there's also some broader gets for companies when they regularly participate in Five for the Future. The first is that you get to identify and recruit talent. A lot of WordPress companies are hiring right now. And what I've seen in the community is that Five for the Future organizations who are visibly and regularly involved tend to be more enticing to contributors who want to be in the WordPress space and have sponsored contribution time. Speaking as a sponsored contributor, I love my job. I love my team. I love spending time in the community doing what I do. And so when my company is hiring, and we definitely are, I share those opportunities and refer people from the community who I think would be a good fit. And I know a lot of other people do the exact same. Companies who sponsor individuals do end up having more influence on the direction of the WordPress platform. It is a unique challenge to listen to so many voices, but it's really important to do so if we are building software for everyone, which is the goal here. WordPress really tries to make decisions transparently and with the community, and every day decisions are being discussed and made in the WordPress Slack and on WordPress.org blogs. It's hard to keep up with. There is a lot going on in that community. But sponsoring employees who become established contributors enables them to share their perspectives and raise concerns, which helps to shape the development of WordPress. And that's really beneficial for both your company and for WordPress. I see sponsored employees from hosting companies, for example, raise concerns about where decisions impact hosting. And the same for SEO, for plugin developers, for theme developers. Being a subject matter expert and sharing your thoughts about the direction of WordPress with that perspective is really valuable for WordPress software and helps your organization in the long run. So if you are a company built on WordPress, those are some really big wins for you. And of course, the impact that companies can have is exponential. When you sponsor individuals, you contribute to the future of the open web. That 42.4% of the internet is growing. The estimated economy for WordPress at the end of 2020 is predicted to increase by 6.5% to 635.5 billion this year. And not only that, by participating in Five for the Future and contributing to WordPress, you help protect those four freedoms of open source and empower everyone who wants to have a voice on the internet. And so that's what I mean when I say that everyone does win with Five for the Future. So I bet by this point you are all wondering how to get started. And I'm very glad that you are asking. So I'm going to give you 3 simple steps. The first is, if you are an organization, sign up on the Five for the Future site. You can also register if you're an individual. Second, find your area of interest for contribution. Maybe it's core, maybe it's support, maybe it's translation, maybe you want to join me over on community. And third, join the Slack. And then join that Teams channel and say, hi, I'm here and I want to help. As a bonus step, go check out Learn WordPress. This is a newish resource for anyone who wants to learn more about WordPress, whether it is using it, building it, contributing to it. There's a more in-depth workshop on open source. There's more info on what contribution to WordPress looks like. And there's a lot of other really great content about WordPress there. And new workshops are being added regularly. And you can even join the discussion group to learn about WordPress with other people. And the training team, which is working on growing Learn WordPress right now, is also looking for input from companies because we want to make sure that we deliver content that offers professional development opportunities to all of your future potential employees. And so with that, I expect to see all of you in the WordPress Slack tomorrow, right? If you do make it there, and I really hope you do, please do come and say hi. I am Angela Jin, and you can find me with the username Angela S. Jin everywhere, Slack, Twitter, all of that. I would love to meet you and help you along your contribution journey.
Thank you so much. That is such a huge amount of knowledge. But it is all very, very important. And it's important for all of us, right? Like, it's not just about me. It's about the community as a whole. There are some questions in the Q&A section,
Excellent.
so I am going to dive right on in. First of all, are kind of about you personally.
Oh, all
What
right.
what was your first contribution to the project?
Oh goodness. So I definitely joined on the community team because, oh no, actually, I'm just remembering now. So I wanted to join the community team. That was where I was most interested. And I went to a local meetup in Seattle where I started captioning a WordCamp talk. And it was something I never expected to be doing. Um, but I got a lot of help. And I think that was my first contribution.
What is your WordPress origin story?
Well, I did write a HeroPress article about this, which I'm happy to share. It's really a series of happy events. Like I shared earlier, I was working at a commercial real estate consulting firm as a program manager and had a great team there. And I was also administering a certificate program at the University of Washington through my work there. And the website that they gave me to use with the students was just terrible. And so I was looking for a solution. And I happened to meet this really handsome guy through a friend who could build me a WordPress site. And so he helped me build that. We kept talking, and I married him. And so he is my husband today.
You too, eh? My origin story revolves around my husband as well. He was using WordPress long before I was, and he suckered me into learning the thing. And now there's no out, which is great. I love being in the WordPress community, so
but
happy to
it
be
was
here. But it's funny.
Yeah, and it was fantastic. Not only did I get a life partner, I got a website that I could manage without knowing any code. So
It works out really well. So with all of that, I know that it's sometimes can feel daunting to dive in and start contributing. What do you recommend for people to do, like introspectively, to figure out where they should kind of dive in and start? Because there's so
Mm,
many teams and there's so many
yeah.
like angles and facets to contribution. What would you say is like the path of least resistance?
Oh, path of least resistance. I mean, I don't know if I'd approach it as path of least resistance. I think it's everybody. One thing I love about this community is hearing everybody's origin stories because they are so wildly, fantastically different. And so when you think about where you want to contribute, it's really your story. It's your journey that you get to decide on. And um, I think it's really a combination of what do you want to be doing? What interests you? Are there skills that you want to grow, that you want to test out, that you want to learn more about? This is a really really interesting place to get that knowledge. Um, and I mean, if you're like me and you know what you want to do, and it's like what you do day in and day out, there's a lot of space for you there too. Um, I I personally just I was working at this private company and I was volunteering a ton and getting really involved on all these nonprofit boards and I've done a lot of volunteering in my life. And what what drew me to all of that was the community building aspect, bringing people together around a shared cause and um, expanding our influence through like good actions. That's what drew me to the community team, and I feel really blessed to be able to do that every single day of my life. So It's, I think, really a personal story. Like go with what you want, and if you run into challenges, which inevitably you will, because that's kind of part of life. Um, there's going to be people around to help you out, and I would be happy to be that person for any of you. If you run into trouble on your contribution journey, uh, DM me and tell me about it, and let's talk.
Awesome. Yeah, and having mentors, there's tons of people who love to mentor others. There's tons of people who are just ready to help anyone who's ready to dive in. So if you're not
Yeah.
sure if you should be talking to the training team or the marketing team or the community team, just start talking to those teams in Slack, and they'll help you figure out if that's where you want to be. And sometimes you'll do some cross team stuff. I've done work with the training team, helping create things for the youth programming so that everything is copacetic. So definitely just do it. Just dive in. Just
Yeah.
that's my advice, is just do the
Yeah.
thing. Marcus would like to know, is this limited to WordPress core, or do contributors to something like WooCommerce count too?
It's a long test. It's definitely not just limited to WordPress core. There are a ton of make teams on WordPress. If you go to make.wordpress.org, you can see a list of all teams. So I'm going to reiterate this because I love saying this. I do not know how to code. So when I think about like all the people who think that the only way to contribute to WordPress is by being able to code, like use me as your example. I know no code. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to contribute to WordPress. Community, marketing, writing documentation, translating WordPress, maintaining WordPress TV, where we have a huge repository of WordCamp talks, training where you can share your knowledge. I never expected to contribute to teach other people how to use WordPress, but I've created workshops for Learn WordPress, and it was a whole new level of skill that I gained there that I did not expect to do. So, yeah.
Another question that just popped in, is giving back to WordPress required, or is it also okay to use WordPress without contribution?
I mean, I'm not going to make you do anything, but I would encourage you to contribute back if you can. If you're using WordPress, I think that's great, but I think that it goes deeper than WordPress being a tool. I think there's a whole philosophy behind WordPress that is really worth our time to uphold. And so if you can contribute back, please do so. If you can't, that's okay. We're not going to take away your WordPress. We're still going to let you use it. And that sometimes that just happens.
Well, and sometimes you're in a position in life where right now is not a good time either. So
Oh yeah.
just keep in mind that when you have the ability and you have the time, or you have the resources at that point in time, is always it's never a bad time to get started.
Yeah.
There's no better time than today.
Exactly. And this is where companies who are a part of Five for the Future can really help. If you have the resources, hire someone else, sponsor them to contribute back to the project. Like that's life-changing for them, and it makes a big impact on the project too.
Absolutely. What individuals or solo freelancers who own their own business do at their scale to participate in Five for the Future?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, every business is different. You have to decide what's best for your scale. I get that if you are a small team contributing 5%, like if you have 5 people dedicating one person, probably feels like, or sorry, my math is totally off there. But like even if you sponsor a part of that person's time, it's hard. It's a lot. It's asking a lot of a small team. But if you can, that's great. If not, maybe I don't know. Um, I think there's different ways that companies can structure it, and yeah, so I encourage you to be creative with it. One thing that a past employer of mine has done is, if you volunteer some hours on your own time, they would give you those hours as vacation hours, for example, or they even matched your vacation hours so that you get some vacation hours back. And so there's a lot of like alternative ways to structure it beyond sponsoring somebody during company time, I think.
Yeah, and I know several agencies that basically have Five for the Future Friday. And so
Yeah.
they have the one Friday a month where that basically equates to 5% of the time, where that entire day, everyone in the organization is contributing to their different teams. And that is a really good, non-hard to math way to give back, and that everybody can take care of their little corner of the project. So yeah, because then you have your developers doing dev stuff, and yeah.
One company that I see doing that regularly is Web Dev Studios, and
That's what I was thinking
about
of.
it. Yeah, they blog about it and they also have a Twitter hashtag that they use, and it's really fun to see. It's really fun to see what they do. Yeah.
So another question that came in: when people contribute, do they have to like sign up for Five for the Future or a specific team, or can they just like test the water with small little chunks here and there and
Yeah.
find out about opportunities? Like, how's the best way to do that?
Yeah, when I speak with new volunteers, I encourage them to try out different teams, to really get a sense for where they feel at home, where they feel most comfortable. So there's definitely nothing wrong with that. If you do that, I do encourage you to communicate clearly how much time you are contributing, and if you are just testing the waters, that's perfectly fine to say as well. To say, I don't know much about the community team, but I kind of want to just hang out and see what everyone's doing. And is there a small project that maybe I can tackle just to get a sense of what it is that you all are doing here? If I saw that, I would welcome you with open arms, and I'd probably try my darndest to keep you in there so that it becomes more than just testing the waters.
And is there any teams that need more contributors more so than others? I know that there's a couple of teams that only have like 1 or 2 people on them. So what do you see a need currently?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. I think if you asked any team, they would say their team. I mean, I would love to have more community organizers and people who can help us figure out how to more safely move back to in-person events and help others do so. I mean, we have WordPress releases regularly, so people to like keep up on the documentation of that, people to help with the marketing of that, people to help with the support of that, and training. Right now, they have a big mandate with Learn WordPress. They definitely need a lot of people who are willing to share their perspective, share their smarts. It's a hard question. I don't feel like you can go wrong with any team.
I'm loving watching the comments because
Oh, really?
so far I'm seeing Courtney saying, we need more trainers, we need more trainers, we need more, my team, and Taco's like, no, documentation and testing, my team. So I don't think it matters which team you ask or which team you go after. We all need more people. Oh, they're not his teams. He's just preaching for them. Gotcha, Taco. But yes, no matter where your skill sets lie, we need more people. So
Yes.
I think that's the lesson of today. If we could wrap all of this into one thing, that would be start, contribute, do the thing. And don't worry about anything other than where you fit best, right?
Yeah, because I mean, those gets that we talked about, I want you to have them. I want you to get that out of your WordPress contribution experience. Like, you deserve it. Yeah. So find where you feel home. Oh, please, Taco.
For those in the Twitter sphere and on YouTube, Taco said that he's one of Angela's minions, which is probably not 100% accurate, but we appreciate your sense of humor, that's for sure. Angela, thank you so very much for being here with us and for sharing about this project and the WordPress project as a whole. I know it's near and dear to your heart, my heart, everyone in the chat and that's watching this online's heart. So you can be found on Twitter at Angela
Yes.
S. Jin. You can be found in the Make Slack at the same place. And yes, if anybody has any questions, you did invite them to ask you directly. So they may hold you to that.
Please
awesome.
do.
Next week, I will be our guest. I don't know how that really sounds grammatically, but I will be speaking all about building recurring revenue and how to get paid on your recurring revenue. So for those agency and freelance owners that just have a little difficulty in that department, I'm going to be covering some tips and tricks. And that does it for this episode. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.